Ewan, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since a former guest put us in contact, and I've started to read your lovely book, Artist, Merchant, Seeker, I've been really intrigued to have this conversation with you today.
It's great to be here, man. And I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts. So it's funny to be on the other side of it. It's great to be here.
So, as you are aware, then we jump straight in with: is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Yeah. So, okay. I've been thinking about this the last couple of days since I knew this was coming. And a really clear, it feels quite clear to me. There are basically two questions, which is who am I and what am I doing here? Like, like what's my role here? I think that's the one that was, I wouldn't have put it in those terms, but I remember being a teenager, kind of lying in my room, trying to contemplate the nature of this weird place and like what's going on, and trying to feel like I was trying to find my place, I think, in some sense. Like I had again, I couldn't have put it in these terms at the time, but I had a feeling like, I think I'm here for some kind of reason. I don't think it's arbitrary, but what the fuck is it? And I didn't, it was more challenging at those times. Then when I found the spiritual path in my 20s, then it started to come together. I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to work out, yeah, the nature of self, essentially, and the purpose of this particular self, you and here in this life. Like, what am I here to do? What do I want to bring to this experience? What do I feel like I'm here to contribute? So those have been, yeah, pretty deep questions at the bottom of the whole thing for a while now.
And in terms of just what am I here to do? Can you give me a sense of just how that unfolded for you somewhat?
Mm. So practically, I thought I was here to be a musician first. I grew up around arts and a lot of music, and I went to study music at university. I discovered during that period that that wasn't the thing for me. And that's when I found Ken Wilber's work, which opened up this whole spiritual, psychological pathway. Um, but intuitively, it was, yeah, I always just had this inner sense that it's not random, like we're here for something, but I couldn't quite articulate it. And some of the more kind of traditional spiritual pathways I was walking tended to avoid those kind of things. It was kind of more non-dual, like you are not who you think you are, and this is an illusion, or at least that's the vibe I took from it at the time. And then, but there were other writers I was just thinking about. I don't know if you know David Data's work, but I read his stuff
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my I guess late 20s, and he speaks about this nature, the idea of purpose, which has then become much more mainstream, I think, since then. But I would say, like, if I was to pull back the curtain even further, the last few years, I just had a number of spiritual experiences which kind of confirmed my intuitions to me. Like I had essentially some experiences of soul, or the soul nature of things, my own soul, which came with things like, this would have been far out for me 5 or 10 years ago, but I had a whole bunch of past life memories return unexpectedly. And then just kind of put everything in a really different light. It's like, oh, okay, it's definitely not random. In fact, it's chosen. Like we want to come down here and experience something. And we come here with an intention. And I've done this before. Just like that feels, even though in normal moments in life, that still seems like a strange idea in some ways. In my heart and in my being, I'm like, I know that's true now. So I do think this is my belief. I do feel like we come with an intention. Like it's not set in stone in any way. It's not a destiny, but it's like there's a reason why we wanted to come down here and do something at this amazing time here on Earth right now.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience of just past lives becoming available to you, I guess, and just the effect that that had on you?
Yeah, it was pretty worldview melting. It didn't. I didn't believe in that stuff, to be really honest. That was weird hippie shaman stuff. Um, that I guess intuitively I had maybe an understanding of, but yeah, that was too far out for me, to be really honest. But I found myself on a shamanic path about 7 or 8 years ago for various reasons, and started doing some of that work, and it was amazing. And I found a kind of natural ease or ability I had with it, and it kind of opened up. It's a whole story, but yeah, at some point, basically, I started having these memories coming back, and what's my skeptical mind was working on this all the time during the experience as well. But it was, I'd say, what really struck me was it was like going back into a childhood memory with all of the vivid detail and felt experience, like it's an embodied memory where I'm actually like moved emotionally by what I'm remembering. Except it's not Ewan, it's not anything from my biography, and also then with some kind of like spiritual help and advice, um, helping to like explain what I was seeing or what I was remembering. Sometimes it would just be snapshots of particular events. Sometimes I get this kind of gestalt sense of a whole life. There was one that, that I remembered that had this whole arc to it, which explained all kinds of interesting things about where I was at. And that was what my spirit guide said to me. They were like, the only reason you're having these memories or why anyone remembers these things is because it's relevant to something you're living right now. There's a lesson in it, or there's a theme in it that will help you with what you're actually facing right now. So it was pretty amazing, very world view shattering, and but yeah, like I said, it put everything into a larger context where we're choosing to come and experience this stuff, and death is not therefore definitely not as scary as I perhaps thought it was.
Do you know, just a curiosity I have around that in general, like not your specific
Yeah,
thing, is like, do we, in your understanding of that, then do we sometimes do we pick a path of suffering, like because sometimes when I hear of intention and then potential outcomes from it, they can often, and this isn't what you're doing here, but in generally when I encounter some things like this as well, there can be almost an assumption that there's in following this intention, it will lead to prosperity or it will lead to something or another. Like just in trying to understand the worldview of people who just know immense
yeah,
suffering and then leave through no potential action of their own. Do you get a sense that it's like it can be absolutely anything, even if this intention is there?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah, across the whole spectrum, and perhaps also an intention to come and experience deep suffering,
yeah.
because wow, those are transformative, soul forging experiences. um, yeah, it's this kind of, I think coming down here. So I didn't expect to have this conversation with you, but here we are. Like coming down here into this physical manifest version of life. It's like really deep, like a really low vibration. It's so dense compared to the luminosity I think that perhaps we're more used to as soul beings. Um, and so yeah, it comes with a hell of a lot of challenge, hell of a lot, and that's I think that's the point. The experience of living through lives in these amazing bodies we have with each other in this crazy world, we just learn extraordinary amounts, and suffering is the greatest teacher. that's
Yeah.
that's the basis of it in some way.
For you, just when you mentioned that, even in this question of like, what am I doing here? And kind of the idea or the connection with soul becoming somewhat formative in that exploration. Can you give me a sense even beyond, or maybe the past life part is instrumental in that, but just in communication or in connection with soul, and how that's kind of moving through you with the question of what
Mm,
am I doing here?
mm. It's, I feel like I've gained access. I can do it now when I close my eyes a little bit, of just kind of feeling my kind of wider self. I can feel yours too as we talk. It's just like it's you, but it's kind of it's you beyond, or me beyond our human selves. And the Eastern traditions talk about energy fields, for example, that we're all admitting a kind of subtle energy field. And so my embodied senses is just one of like, I can kind of inhabit that, me and outside of my physical body too. And it like enables me to, I think, both ground just kind of into who I am in this moment, and feel out beyond, you know, my personal contractions and idiosyncrasies and all of that stuff. And that's, that connection is, in a way, where it feels most powerful is in times of suffering or struggle. I feel like I have a bit more access to kind of expand back out again, so I've got room to include all of this like thing I'm struggling with or wrestling with. um, and I think it's given me deeper trust in following my own, like, that way, I don't know why, over there, no, not this, which, my mind can be much more aggressive in its like ten- tending of or controlling of. So it's a kind of deeper trust in the intuitive sense, which was there the whole time, but was just a little more buried. If that Does that make sense? I'm
Oh
trying to
yeah,
describe this in real
absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, as we explore this.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Just in reading your book, and the sense that this has taken 7 years to write. So this is just something I mentioned to you just before I spoke to you, and it's something I've read recently from it. I'd love to know what it is for you that is what that process of 7 years has been like to some degree, in kind of encapsulating, I guess, some of what we're
Mhm.
talking about here already.
Yeah,
Just
so
big, wide, looping questions
no,
being
it's
thrown
great.
at
It's
you.
good. Go with it. So I wrote it before COVID, um, for a first draft, and I spent quite a long time redrafting, getting to a point. I thought it was close. Then COVID happened. We moved house. That year was crazy. Then the next year we had crazy stuff with Coaches Rising, the business I was running at the time. One of our partners stepped out, decided he was done. We'd negotiated a business divorce, which I'd never done at that level before. My son was born, etc. And it ended up basically sitting on a shelf while I became incredibly busy running Coaches Rising with Joel, much busier than I'd ever wanted to be. And so it just had no room. And I think also that was all a good convenient excuse for me still resisting taking this step, which was really scary for me. So in 2024, end of 2024, I stepped out of Coaches Rising for various reasons. I kind of come to the end of something and I physically burned out, which was pretty humbling. I didn't think that would ever happen to me. And that led into a whole existential inquiry, spiritual crisis. What am I doing here? What's going on? And during that, it was loud and clear in my awareness. It was like, I have to finish this book. I absolutely have to finish this book. And that's how writing has always felt to me too. It's like I'm really interested in it. I'm super curious. It feels like a great creative process, but I also feel like I have to. Like if I don't do this, something goes wrong, or I don't feel like it's something very off. So I knew I had to do it. So that was last year. That was almost every day. Get to my writing desk, work on it all morning, see how far I can get. And it was it was it was a long process. And I think a really significant and big step for me. I've known for a while I wanted to write books, more than one, and I've generally had struggles, which is partly what the book is about, of really bringing all of myself into the marketplace and into the world. And so, this was a big step. And there was a definite vulnerability hangover during the first couple of weeks after I put it out. It's going great. There's lots of flow, and I feel super grateful and excited today. But it was, there was some juice in there. There was there was some stuff. It worked me for sure.
Can you give us was there any particular experience that comes to mind in being worked like that?
It's not, I don't have a specific, like one part of it or something, but it was the process of crafting and recrafting and making the whole thing like really clear and clean just took a long time. I'm a really intuitive, kind of more poetic writer by nature, so my structure's just all over. I'm quite non-linear. So the process of turning the raw materials into something which is really cohesive and covers all that just took a long time, which is, in a way, I kind of feel like I don't have that natural conscientious drive. It shows up with the things I'm super passionate about in abundance, but it's got to be turned on by like my passion, or like this is something I really want to do. So I really wanted to do it. I was absolutely dedicated, but it took a lot of discipline to show up. Reworking the first chapter, I remember reworking did take a long time. Maybe that's the memory, actually. It was coming back to the draft, reading through it, kind of knowing, okay, I actually need to rework the whole start of the book, which took me like 2 months or something,
Okay.
Excruciatingly slowly for my for my fast creative mind. Yeah.
Can you give me a sense of because one of the reasons when we were put in contact by Joe, one of the reasons why I was more than happy to, or why I really wanted to interview you, is something what you're covering. I think is probably pretty applicable to, perhaps many people that are listening. It's definitely applicable to me, and as I'm reading it, I'm like going, "Oh, this is interesting." um, can you can you give me, I guess, a sense of just why this book, why this, even the format in which it's laid out, and
Mm.
maybe even in the context of what am I here to do, like even from your own perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So I think the book is essentially about, well, the subtitles kind of says it, bring your whole self to the path of work. So the book was me articulating something I've been trying to live for a long time, which is, like, how do I bring my whole self to this thing? I'm someone who kind of hasn't necessarily fitted in very well to some of the mainstream boxes. And so, I've been trying to find my own places to play. And for some reason, despite not having an upbringing around business, that was the thing I was called to in my 20s. I wanted to go and be an entrepreneur like a bunch of my friends. And there was this feeling of, but I want to bring all of myself. I'm an artist, I'm deeply creative, and I'm really committed to the spiritual path. In fact, that's kind of the whole point of it for me. It's a spiritual quest. How can that exist alongside business? Like, and can it? And so like some of my early explorations were in that area. And then the book came out. Well, the book is basically about a model. It's about these three archetypes: the artist, the merchant, and the seeker, which came quite intuitively through my writing, 10 years ago or so. They kind of kept just appearing in articles I was writing. And I was like, that's interesting. And then one day, I noticed that they aligned with this deep philosophical structure that I'd found in Ken Wilber's work, and I was like, "Oh my god, this aligns to something." And I love maps, and I have a high bar on kind of elegance and how you represent stuff. So I tested the crap out of that thing and tried to falsify it, and I was like, "No, this seems to hold up. It passed my own test." And um, I started to think through it. I started to use it a little bit with clients and talk about it a lot. And then, yeah, as I first wrote out the book, that's when it kind of came alive. I was like, wow, no, this is a really elegant model for it to explain a bunch of the stuff I've been wrestling with and struggling with for so long. It gave me essentially a wider frame for work. This is the way I talk about it in the book. So in a way, you could say business for me is a dimension of work. Work is the larger whole. That's the thing we're coming here to do. It's a function of a being doing something in that deep polarity. And so, what's our work? Well, I think and the book is written for entrepreneurs. Um, so, how can we include the business merchant dimension of work and the artistic creative dimension and the spiritual seeking dimension? Because I think they're all part of the same whole, but our culture really likes to separate them and think that they're contradictory.
You know, there's something I really enjoyed about this, and I know you're saying this is for entrepreneurs, and but so much in the kind of bring your whole self to work idea. Um, it's all it's around this kind of authenticity. It's kind of loaded with this sense of authenticity, and that can be a bit of a misleading one as well. But this bringing your whole self to your work through the lens of the artist, the merchant, and the seeker. There's one passage in it that really resonated with me, and it said, "The most gifted artist will struggle if they don't know how to market their work. The most conscientious merchant will burn out if their work doesn't contain deeper meaning, and the most devout seeker will contribute little if they don't turn their wisdom into forms that connect to people." And I don't know, just that as I think many people, if they're, either self employed or running their own thing or whatever it might be, there's something about that and through the simplicity and elegance of that through that lens that it's, I think it's the real value in that is like holding that as potentially a very alive thing, like being aware of those three dimensions of ourselves in the act of engaging in the marketplace. Um, I don't know. It just seemed like a particularly telling paragraph within this.
Mm, thanks for reading that back too. It's great to hear it read back. Yeah, as you read those words, it lights me up again. I'm like, yes, that's the thing. It's that these are bringing each of these archetypes are bringing something really central and core to us, like parts of just what makes us human beings and how we show up in the world of work. And while we have this amazing society where we have the freedom to do this, for example, from different parts of the world, and it's utterly incredible. And that's the gift of our modern one of the gifts of our modern culture. And while it's changing, the mainstream is generally still very dissociated, I would say, in terms of this larger whole. Spirituality is generally not something that's welcome in the office. And I think I think that's the amazing transformational point we're at, that these things are mixing already. I mean, you see it all over social media. People are just making their own channels, mixing these archetypes in all kinds of interesting ways. And I think that's what's required. I think the kind of collective growth that we're all invited into right now is just asking us to show up more fully and bring our multidimensionality, because we have so much in us and our world wants us to kind of fit into these narrower ideas.
For you, how is your own kind of, I don't want to make it sound like a loop through this model as such, but how is your own, how have you come to kind of, I guess, intimately know each of these archetypes?
That's a great question. So I think the first phase of it has been like including them all at the, putting them all on the table and trying to include them all in my own sense of self. So like claiming and owning those dimensions of myself, claiming and owning my artistry, I think was first one, even though I'd studied in that domain, really kind of claiming that for myself, that I'm artistic, that I'm creative, I think was important. And then also with spirituality. The one I had with the seeker, the one I had more trouble with was the merchant. That's, I talk about this in the book. I've had a long kind of journey to integrate that archetype in ways that like didn't violate my own ethics or you know view of the world. I My upbringing was in general kind of fairly suspicious of money and commerce and business. So that's been a long journey. I have a mentor who's an amazing, I talk about him, Rand, who was former chairman of Conscious Capitalism, which is also an organization which is looking at, okay, how do you make business actually conscious, like a spiritual practice? So he's taught me a great deal. I've learned an enormous amount. So part of it is like learning to claim that in myself. Okay, I'm an experienced entrepreneur. I know marketing. This is in me. And working through my resistances that didn't want to be seen as that. Like I kind of want to be the mystic poet in a way, and resisted my business and entrepreneurial ability at many points, despite like choosing that as a career path, as a work path. Then I'd say in more recent years, it's intertwined, and this is probably one of the reasons I needed to wait 7 years to actually finish it, which is in the meantime, it's intertwined with some of my shamanic spiritual explorations, which is essentially shamans. One of the things they're doing is communicating or exploring non-ordinary reality. So kind of imaginal reality. They can step out of the physical and kind of journey through different realms. And then therefore they can communicate with non-physical beings or the non-physical dimension of things like trees, whatever it may be. So I discovered like, oh, you can do this with the archetypes in yourself too. It's exactly the same mechanism. And it functions a little bit like IFS too, if you know that, internal family systems. Like they're just part of you. So that's the amazing thing about archetypes. They're all built into our source code. You don't have to, go and attain one of these archetypes. It's already in you. You're just gotta find it and get to know it and give it some more room. So I think the last few years it's been also more internal work of like literally tuning into for example, my inner merchant and feeling like his quality, which is this universal archetype, but channeled through me as a unique person. He shows up in a particularly, weird form, particular to me. And I can get a sense of that quality that he has that's really me. And also sometimes he'll give me advice. Like, have you thought about this? Or go and pay attention to that thing,
how does he show up? And I guess, how do you meet him? How would you describe that?
Well, for me, it's just kind of doing, closing my eyes, centering, and like you would do in IFS or some kind of imaginal practice, just kind of bringing that presence like into the room with you, or so that you're aware of them. He never talked about this. He shows up as a kind of like medieval trader on a cart. He's got like a horse and cart, and he's got a load of stuff in his cart. I think it's plant medicine he's got in his cart. I'm not sure exactly what it is, and he's kind of like smoking a cigar or something. And but he's he's very kind, very kind of self-confident, and basically has this ethos that, like, if you've got the good shit, like, give it to people, like, make sure that they know, because this is really good for people. If this is the thing that's, can really help them with what they're going through, like, make sure that they know it's available. Don't be shy. It's that kind of ethic.
And just really intrigued, from your point of view, just how you said, like, even your upbringing, there was some suspicions around money and trade and commerce. And I know you're mentioning your mentor there, but just for you, what was some of that journey like? Clearly, the spiritual practice became very hugely important in your 20s. Just wondering kind of how that fused together for you.
Yeah, yeah, many years of exploration. Well, some of it early on was, like I was saying, kind of claiming my inner entrepreneur or my inner merchant, and seeing myself as that, and that was possible, that I could go and do this thing, coaching and writing and sharing my ideas, and that I could be paid for it. I had to work out through experience whether whether this was possible or not, and expand my idea of, for example, what I could charge for my services. It's a common thing I used to coach clients with back then too. the there's a psychic energy to bigger numbers, and really good coaches sometimes would provoke me, or can provoke people, like, well, have you considered what would it be like to charge this for your thing? And there'd be this shrinking contraction, like, there's no way I'm worth that, and all these kind of inner stories. So partly it was a practice of of owning and claiming the value that I was bringing, and that was a deep process, I would say. Then there was a there's been a lot of worldview integration, in a sense. I explored fields to do with business and commerce that I didn't know much about. I read some economics, so I understood the first principles at least, and explored different kinds of politics that I wouldn't have been interested in before, and tried to just get at it from other perspectives. I would listen to a lot of podcasts too, so listening to really high up business leaders or entrepreneurs, at the top of the global game. How do they think about things? How do they look at it? And while it always felt unnative to me, like I just kind of come at the world differently, I think the more I explored that stuff, the more I could then find that perspective in myself too. Like, oh, I have, I can see it that way as well. And so I think it's been a philosophical journey too. And the book is probably like the latest piece of that, which is really exploring these things on an archetypal level. It was very healing for me, in well, healing the contradictions I was struggling with, and that suspicion we were talking about, early childhood suspicion. So, at the heart of the ethic of the merchant is this orientation to goodness. That's how I describe it in the book. So the good, the true, and the beautiful are what ground these three archetypes. So the merchant speaks the language of goodness. Remember when I first saw that, I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Are you sure? And as I thought about it, it was like, no, this is right. And one of the ways we can see it is in the language, because merchants trade in goods. So it's even in how we think about this. So at the heart of the ethic is this idea that if I have something good and valuable, in economics we call it value, that's valuable to you, and I exchange it for something that you have that's valuable to me, we actually create more value and goodness than we had at the beginning. Like it literally like makes it bigger. There's more goodness now because we've made this good exchange. That's the mechanism at the bottom of economics. Value exchange increases the economy. So the principle is there, but I'd say in our modern world, there's some shadow merchant ethics in large operation in some parts of our world, which kind of violate, in my understanding, that ethic at the heart, which is we've got to check it's good. So there's actually three checks. It's like, is it good for me to make this exchange with you? Is it good for you? And is it good for our wider community that we're in the context of? If you can say yes to all of those things, it's just good. Like, this is a good thing. Like, let's absolutely do this. Unfortunately, lots of our business doesn't play to that ethical standard. It's like, well, it's good for the corporation, and if we can do that at the expense of, the environment or our employees or our competitors, like, that's fair game. So it's what I've been able to do is like tune deeper into the archetypal energy at the bottom of this thing rather than the expression I see around me a lot, which I don't want to perpetuate. I'm seeing business practices that like, I don't want to play part of that game. I want to do it differently. So finding my own expression of how to do marketing or how to present things.
Which I think is, I think there's a kind of a beautiful reclaiming within that. Like in terms of, I think it's easy to look at the marketplace, and I fall into this myself sometimes and go, ah, for fuck's sake, like
Yeah.
look at the state of how we're doing
Right.
this.
Right.
Um, but that's also disempowering, right? Like, and it I think it often involves lots of different projections too. Like, I used to work in finance and maybe saw things in the ways things were done, which I didn't think related to this idea of good that you're talking to. I also kind of love the, not that it's the etymology of goods or something, but there's something about stripping it back to that, and
Mm.
the simplicity in which you're connecting those things, which I think is, it feels kind of important to me, or quite telling, if you get me.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I could definitely see how the merchant could have been something of a, or there was more friction in that process for you than the artist, like based on where you started in life and the background that you're from, and but then this notion of even shamanic work that you've touched on a couple of times, and the integration of the seeker. Um, I'm really curious, just from what your path within that was, and just even how that, I guess, continues to evolve for you.
Mm. Yeah. I feel most native in the seeker. I kind of feel like that's kind of how I'm built and how I orient. So I think as I started to get a sense of myself in my 20s, I knew that that was somehow part of the path. And my very first entrepreneurial endeavors were kind of in the in a spiritual context. But at that point, I didn't really know if you could get them together, like if they fitted. So one of my really early experiences that helped me with that was I had a small business, and most of it was I guess an early podcast. That term wasn't there, but we called it an interview series. 2011, called Waking Up the Workplace, and me and a couple of friends interviewed some of our heroes in what we were calling the conscious business movement, which wasn't also really a term much at that point. I think it's much more widespread now, but it's pretty early. So we got to interview these different elders of the field about their perspectives on the whole thing. I think we did about 15 or something in the end. And that convinced me. I was like, these definitely go together. These are people who are either explicitly spiritual or explicitly into consciousness work and deep in the business world. And I found, I was kind of convinced, like, okay, not only does this go together, I think this is part of the emergent future. Like, this is going to happen more. And so I think that gave me the confidence to pursue it. But then honestly, a lot of it has been just emergent on the path. That's why writing's been so important for me, to kind of work out what I'm doing. Like I spent a long time early on, for example, working with clients who are also more spiritual or doing consciousness work. And like, so how do you sell and market that kind of stuff? That's been, and we would do that at Coaches Rising too, although Coaches Rising, it's filling a really important role in kind of training more mainstream leadership coaches. But we always try to bring in as much consciousness work and spirituality as we could get away with. And early days, I think we'd have to Trojan horse it a bit more. And these days, I think people are much more open. I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like especially since COVID, probably, I mean, I listen to really mainstream famous people on podcasts talking about explicit mystical stuff now, which I don't think was happening 5 or 6 years ago. So I do think it's changed, but I guess the bottom answer to your question is I just couldn't do it any other way, man. Like, these things have got to fit together. I don't know if they do. Okay, I think they do. Let's just work it out as we go along.
When you mentioned almost the humbling experience of experiencing physical burnout, I'm really intrigued by an awareness of some ideas, clearly experiences, clearly really lived, and then also the potential for that to occur as well, even within the midst of putting a book together like this. Curious from you, just the humbling nature of that, and just kind of what that maybe taught you, or what you experienced through that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really humbling for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't think that would ever happen to me. I had this slightly arrogant belief that I was immune to that kind of thing. Because I'm so, in some ways, uncompromising about following my own path,
Right.
I thought I would never get into that situation. I think what I didn't realize, this was one of the things I learned, is I also, and to put it in context, like, people have reflected to me over the years, for example, that I can have a bit of a lone wolf energy. Like, I'm just going to follow my own path. And if that means leaving the tribe, I'm going to go off over there. Okay. But working with Joel at Coaches Rising, we're co-owners of the company, and he's my deep soul brother too. So we're deep in. And I basically found that there was this part of me that was just willing to die for the cause. This kind of inner soldier who, if it means death, fine. You don't leave the lines, you don't back away. And I think because I was probably unconscious of that dimension of me, I nearly kind of killed myself physically. I mean, it didn't actually get practically dangerous, but my body was manifesting enough stuff physically that, like, something had to give. And it was my shamanic practice that helped me in that too. I found this practice of basically when I was in deep suffering, the practice became, well, you go to the bottom of the well, like you go all the way down and you surrender as much as you can into the darkness of the feeling of this whole thing. Go right to the bottom, and there at the bottom of the well, you can see things or see messages or hear them that you can't hear anywhere else. This is the only place you can get it. So when you're in the difficult stuff, go down and get the message. And right at the end, before I talked to Joel and discovered this whole thing, I was in a lot of physical pain, some stuff that was happening in my body. And I went right to the bottom, and my guides just said, or a voice said, Ewan, you're burned out and you need to stop now, today. Moves me now as I speak it, as I remember that day. And that was humbling, because it was like someone had told me the truth that I was avoiding, and I knew it was true, and I knew that was what I needed to do. It led to a very humbling conversation with Joel. He was very gracious about it. We managed to, give me some time off to see what we were going to do about the whole thing. And then what I discovered is the second humbling part of it was how much I felt like I'd failed, and how much I was scared of letting everyone down. Like, I'm playing such an important role here. I'm leading a team. People are depending on me, and I'm not going to be here. Fuck. Can they make it through? I felt so guilty, which I didn't fully expect. Like, that one got me. And then, and then the process that I think everyone who's experienced this probably goes through, which is there's a physical rest and recuperation that you have to do. If it's hit that point, you're physically drained, which is real. And it's a deep existential inquiry then at that point. Like, okay, why has this happened? What have I not been paying attention to? What needs to change? Because if I just go back to the same thing after taking some time out, it's just going to come around again. Like, there's something really big here. And one of the things I saw during that period was I was so busy being a merchant. I was kind of overdosing almost on being a merchant with a to-do list that never ended. And I wasn't writing, and I wasn't coaching and working with people directly. And if I realized, like, and that's some of the stuff I think I'm here to do. Like, that's one of the intentions I had, was to kind of come and try and share some of the knowledge I have and help people through the transformational process. And I didn't get to do that while I was working full time as business leader. And I knew that had to stop. I just knew it.
What is it like to hear that voice and to hear it with such clarity that you just know truth is being spoken?
It's amazing. I mean, it just has me feel so much less alone. Like, that, like, I'm loved, and beings or people are looking out for me. And when I receive guidance like that, it's coming from love. That's been the amazing experience of the whole thing. Like, it's all love. There's no judgment. There's no condemnation in anything. It's all in service of, here's the difficult thing you're in, and here's lovingly what we want to share with you. Hearing the voice in that particular moment was really painful, because it was a really hard truth to hold in. I think I probably just cried buckets for like an hour or something. I can't quite even remember. It was certainly a very deep emotional experience. But in general, it feels, I feel more grace present, I suppose I could say. Like, that we're not alone here. There is a wider intelligence that's also with us, trying to help in its different ways.
Yeah, man, I felt total just a kind of spontaneous goosebumps in my body when you mentioned
Mm.
that we're not alone with that.
Yeah.
I know, through all the various practices that you mentioned you engage in, and the spiritual inquiry for such a long time as well. Can you give me a sense of that process of sinking to the bottom of something and kind
Mm.
of just what that entails for you?
Mm. Yeah. I've done a lot of body work and embodied work the last several years. So I'd say the basis is in that. So it's not simply a kind of sitting in stillness meditation mode. I'll often be physically like down on my floor, sitting or kneeling on all fours, those kind of postures, sometimes lying down. And so it's kind of like an embodied meditation. It's like get really present, but also get really present to the sensations and the feelings that are actually moving through my body and allow those, just move whatever I'm feeling. And in those moments where I'm kind of conscious of like, okay, this is about going to the bottom of the well, it feels like it's always hard to put words to these things, but it's like it's really letting go. It's like letting myself fall. There's a sense in which I'm kind of holding myself up so that I can kind of hold myself together and function, and I'm okay, and I can like get through this. And it's just like letting all of that kind of fall, and I kind of drop. It's definitely a downward sense of kind of dropping, and then an intensification of whatever emotions I'm feeling. And as much as I can, just allowing that to happen, allow my body to express it in movement or in sound. And then I think it's good. I'm learning about this as I answer your question. There's a feeling of then almost kind of just resting in it at the bottom. And it's not necessarily pleasant, like it can be quite intense, but I can also just kind of rest in that darkness and in some way kind of be at peace with it. Like, okay, I'm just here. Maybe it's not as scary as I thought it would be, and it's intense, but I'm here, and okay, I'm still present. Um, I'm able to stay in intensity because I've practiced it a lot. Sometimes I think that's where people can struggle with it, because if you really let go and allow the whole thing to embody, there could be some really strong feelings in there that perhaps you've been keeping at bay for a long time, and it can be super intense. I've practiced through my own practice and with a body worker how to kind of self-regulate through a lot of embodied intensity. So if I can sit in peace there, yeah, then I'm kind of just opening myself to like, does anyone want to say anything? Is there any message I need to get? Is there anything I need to know here? And sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Um, but yeah, in certain moments, it's been like that one I described. I mean, it was like the thing I needed to hear that I just couldn't see.
That's that's beautifully put, and it actually reminds me of a moment in my early 30s where, God bless her, she's my wife is was pretty understanding of my strange inquiries shortly after we met. But I remember feeling always having felt this deep insecurity or jealousy in relationships, and then one
Mm,
day after I experienced it early on in the relationship, just resting on the wooden floors in her apartment in Hamburg at the time, and going through what you kind of almost described there, of this repeated emotional release, resistance, acceptance, and then a brief period of peace, and a
right.
repeated cycling of this
Yeah.
almost to the sense of something dying, or
Yes.
to something that to that effect. So I'm grateful just to hear you say that, because it also just brings up that memory for me. I was like, oh, that's what may have been happening.
Yes. Yes.
Um, you know, just from what I really like as well, just about that experience of what you're bringing, like I I sense, I feel the clarity or the cohesion in which you're writing. I think it comes on the back of experiences like this, and humblings even within a path. Like, God only knows what I'll be finding out in the next few years or experiencing about myself. Do you know what I mean? But even that repeated openness to these occurrences and having the tools, I think, then to navigate them. I think that's what it's to me. That's what it feels kind of all about. It's not the avoidance that something like this will never happen. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like we can be really afraid of the dark because it's painful and scary and intense and brings all kinds of stuff up. But I mean, there's light hidden down there, and I think the journey to go down or like deep inside to excavate it, like you come back with more of yourself. I think you find lost parts of yourself, and wow, we need to do a lot of that work today. the Where it's such an intense, you know, part of the human journey. It feels like, I mean, the world is just changing so fast, so much uncertainty. I remember hearing recently Brené Brown saying, from her perspective, neurobiologically, we're just not wired for this much uncertainty.
Mm.
And so we're coming up against the limitations of our own biology. I think we're also coming up against just how much trauma we're all carrying, just for generations and generations. Some more than others, depends where you're from in the world, but kind of from wherever you're from, I think we're just carrying so many centuries of stuff that's definitely still in us. And I think that's why your experience on the floor in Hamburg and my experience on the floor here, like that's part of that work. It's like, okay, here it is. Here it is.
Just even in the context of that world, and I think there's a line I read in your book where it's, I'm paraphrasing here, but much to the effect of like given that the world is what it is, it feels almost more not incumbent upon us, but it seems more of the reason of what we're here to do is to do good work, essentially. And just curious from your perspective, the timing of your book and the timing of the context in which it's released within, and how you see those kind of come together.
Yeah, I feel like I had no intelligent design on the timing of this.
Yeah, yeah.
But in a way, maybe it's better timing now than 5 or 6 years ago when perhaps I could have tried to finish it and release it. I certainly feel like we're all really, well, maybe not all of us, but many of us feel like we're explicitly aware of how significant this juncture is and how fast stuff is changing. Like we're actually like in the midst right now of stuff that, probably in centuries in the future people talk about this time like that was a serious that was a
That's the
serious
time.
juncture that those guys and women took us through. So I don't yeah, this is my small offering. This is what wanted to come through me. And I think it's part of so many of us, like what you're doing with your podcast, and millions of other people I think are following this same impulse of like, there's something with more light and brightness and hope that we're trying to bring in here, and it doesn't have to all look like this. But it's I think it's going to be a long process without anyone in control of it, and I have no idea where we end up with this.
Yeah. Just given where we started, even with the idea of, who am I and what am I here to do? And, the experiences of trying to find your way in the world, and even with the initial acceptance of perhaps I won't solely be the musician or the artist, then even the expressions or explorations of spirituality within trying to find your way in the world. explorations into past lives, even stuff that really shattered your worldviews, heeding the comforting or confronting sounds of the soul at times. What I think is a beautiful offering that you're bringing into the world now with the artist, merchant, seeker, and this sense of bringing more of wholeness to us, but not just in the way, as I say, I see it kind of suggested in other places, but then even just the significance of that model is very alive in the sense that it's always something to tend to. You mentioned that you were fully in merchant mode for a while, and then needing to lean into some of the other aspects of
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So there's this beautiful aliveness to it, and then this kind of humbling, just ongoing path and exploration. I'm really curious, given all that we've discussed, you, and to ask you the question of what is a good life for you.
I love that you asked this question. I love that your podcast is based on this question. I was thinking about it last night and I was like, I do not know. It's such an amazing question. What did come to me, and it's here present now as I tune in again, is just this sense of light. I think we're made of light, literally, like that spirit and light are kind of the same thing. And I think there are so many of us with so much light and so much goodness. And I have been someone, and I know so many other people that are similar, who constantly doubt that they're good enough, or that they think they're, am I allowed to play in this bigger game or bring my work out into the world, whatever form it takes. We kind of question it and doubt ourselves, and we have imposter syndrome. And actually, wow, these people have got so much goodness and such great hearts and great intentions. So in a way, I feel like a good life is one where we can learn to show ourselves who we really are, and there's so much goodness in there, but it comes with vulnerability because it's based on our innocence too, of just kind of who we are without any choice. And so I feel like it's it's not the easiest place here on earth necessarily to, at least at this time, to like feel safe and welcome to just bring yourself without self-editing and be innocent in our expression. It can be a tough and challenging world, and yet I think that's exactly what we of our generations here at this time have chosen to do. It's like, let's come down and learn about ourselves as we bring our own light into the world, and hopefully that's going to help illuminate the whole thing and take us into a different chapter. So I guess it's that.
That sounds absolutely delightful to me, and it resonates a lot. And I think your book has come to me at the right time too. But I really love sitting down with you and just hearing more about your own experiences and what's moving you and shaping you with the questions that you carry, and how you're bringing that to the world. So look, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. I look forward to continuing to follow your work, man, and hopefully our paths cross again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your sincerity. And thank you for creating this space.